Can everybody hear me good? Yeah? I'd like to introduce our next presenters for this double session we're having. We have Mr. Rod Gray, and his background is he's a compliance manager with Aerotech, and he's been in the business for 45 years in quality management, system professional, and consulting, ranging in many different industries. He has a Bachelor's of Science degree in Industrial Management from Northeastern University. He is a Green Belt and a certified IRCA auditor. At the request of Rod, a special introduction to Robert Kozak Sparty. Currently works on the D&V Automotive Technical Team. He has worked in the auto industry for over 25 years. And he has also worked in the area of reducing variation in supply chain. He's also worked as a process industrial engineer, quality manager, and has R&D responsibilities. He has a bachelor's degree in environmental science and with a minor in chemistry. He's done many different Six Sigma projects, and I would imagine his passion is probably process improvement. Anyway, they have the floor. Welcome them, please.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to be talking this afternoon about the successful transition from the ISO TS 6949 standard, the 2009 version, to the new IATF 16949 2016. And an easy way to kind of get that rolling off of your tongue is we've kind of come up with the ISO 9 for the 9001. So ISO 9 and IATF 16, or I9 and I16. So that's kind of like new acronyms that are coming out. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to have a little bit of fun, but take the QMS playbook and put it around a little bit of the competition between the two rival football teams here in Michigan. And we'll see who comes out the winner in the end. So in the playbook, we basically have the I9, the I16, got to have the IATF rules, and something that we're now learning is the transition strategy coming from the IATF. So that's kind of the package of requirements over and above your QS or your customer-specific requirements, regulatory requirements, all of those, and we'll get into those as well. The other thing that we've started to create in each company that's doing the transition has to provide this for their registrar for the, as I call it, desktop review, but we've got a gap tool that if anybody is interested in that afterwards, we've tried to tailor that around the AIAG rollout, and then we added the requirements of the I9 so that you've got everything packaged into one, we call it a combo document. So that runs through every section, and you'll see a little bit of the format as we go through. And then there's also my company. I'm with Aerotech as a contractor to Flextronics, now a new name Flex. But at Flex, our corporate headquarters had created an internal audit checklist. We've neutralized that, taken out the Flextronics name and conventions, but that is a checklist, and that covers, there's tabs, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and it's a checklist for every one of the standards, AS 9100, 13485, the base 901. And then the TS, and then I think there's ESD in there as well. So it's a real good book, not only to help do the gap assessment for transition, but also it's a good book for the auditors, again, which we'll talk about, the internal auditors that we need to get their competency level to a new level for the IATF. This is what we've called the baker's dozen, but the team playbook. And we've got a Gantt chart at the end that we'll show, but these are the 13 steps that we've kind of, at a high level, we've tailored that you have to do to get a successful transition and a successful third-party audit. But you've got to get these, so your QMS rep has to really have all of the handbooks. And you can get these also, you can get those from the AIAG if you're a member at a very, very good reduced price. They also now have this on an e-copy that you can purchase for, I think it's about $1,200 a year. So our company, again, part of our leadership commitment, we've got all of these on e-copy for everybody worldwide around the Flex globe. And there's about 220,000 folks of various standards, but we're talking basically the IATF and the automotive. So you've got the rollout to the organization or a kickoff. There's got to be a decision point. Do you revise your current manual, or do you go with the new manual? And I've actually seen in today's market, I've actually seen folks that are still driven by the 20 elements of the old QS 9000. So that's a decision even from ISO TS 16949 to IATF. It's a decision that you have to make early on. You've got to prepare the gap with the process owners, having a Gantt chart, kind of a timeline, and basically your Gantt chart could look just like this with folks rolled out as to the responsibilities. I like to put that in there, contact your registrar, and we've got a slide voice of the system, and there's a VOR, voice of the registrar. So as Michelle had said from the leadership in Toyota this morning, everybody is a customer. So the registrar is our customer, and from a registrar's point of view, we're their customer. And so it's that partnership that you're looking for. So contact them early, find out what the nuances are from your registrar, maybe different than my registrar. So you want to know what those are so that you're starting to build that structure in your playbook. Complete the gap. You got to do it for both of these, the I-9 and the I-16. You've got to train all manufacturing site and all RSLs, remote support locations. So we'll talk about that interaction as well, but everybody has to be trained. You've got an internal audit plan, which is old school stuff by now, and then you've got to audit all the shells, all the documented information, and all the documented processes. Does anybody know how many documented processes are required? Yet, 21. And a lot of those are new, and some of them you'll see can be combined as well together. And then from the audit, what's your corrective action? What's your management review? So all of that's packaged, your gap, your corrective actions, your internal audit. You've got a management review cycle. Then you're ready to go out to the registrar. And if there's any questions, just throw those out along the way. We're happy to answer any questions as we go. These are the mandatory documented processes. Product safety, calibration, you got problem solving, error proofing, continual improvement. You'll see in here that we at Flex have combined these here together. So you'll see that's in one turtle or one core process. Okay, so keep it simple. And the old way of doing business, the binders, the hunk of binders, you can keep them if you want. I always tell our manufacturing sites, knock yourself out if you want, but we're going to have a lean process, which you'll see a little bit of here pretty soon. Okay, so there's some the mandatory documented information. The old word in the ISO TS days was records, and you'll see documented information in I-9, and you'll see the word records still used in the new I-16. So it's basically all of your records that you need to keep. And there's the rest of the list. And just as an example, the very first one that was up there on the slide before, risk assessment 6121. Okay, so that's a documented record that you got to have. Very good example would be your FEMA, failure modes effects analysis. Another one from the medical would be good business practices is a risk register. The other one that you could have is a program management, usually has a very good risk register line by line for every project. So there's a lot of reds and yellows that you could actually turn those into what are your risks and then what's the risk mitigation. And again, that's a record that needs to be kept. And then you'll see in the turtles or the process maps, we've built in at Flex, we've built in a risk register for each process. Okay, so why should we do all of this? It's now about risk-based thinking, risk, risk, risk. And there's a requirement, 713 infrastructure, talks about what the organization shall do, including software. How many folks are involved with software? So there's a bit, I would say a big change. It was always in the old TS version, but it's got a real power punch to it today. So there's also 8323, development of products with embedded software. That's coming for more and more of us when we get into the autonomous vehicles and what's out there today. So the other one is 723, auditor competency. So our internal auditors have to now be competent not only to audit like the old days QS 9000 or TS 16949 and some customer specific requirements. Customer specific requirement for General Motors refers to a records management procedure by General Motors. Does anybody know how long you have to keep records for General Motors? Design records. 50 years. So now at Flex, we say forever, so we're covered. But again, you've got to know that. So that's one that you could get tripped up in an internal audit. You could find yourself with a nonconformance in an external audit for a third-party audit. So again, the auditors have to know how to package their audit plans, what kinds of questions to ask. So it's very critical now. That's another risk. So we have to develop what are the potential risks in each process. We have a turtle, a core process map for auditing. That's one of the things that we have. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but what we've done as a risk mitigation, all of our lead auditors go through AIAG 4 or 5 day lead auditor training or second party auditor training. So they get a certificate right from AIAG. You can also do that with Omnex, Quality Support Group out in Boston, but we package all of our folks through AIAG. So, from you guys out there in the stands, what are some of the things that you could see just early on, whether it's ISO, medical, they're all talking about risks as the base I-9 standard. So, what are some things that you guys see as risks in your processes?
We do have prizes, by the way. I see Joe's got a risk. Ready? Oh.
So, did you have one?
Well, yeah, I mean, we do automotive.
Yep.
So, I mean, we're at a paint facility, so it's always going to be, corrosion, things like paint.
So that's good. So one of the things that you now have is how are you documenting that as part of the documented information, and then what are your risk mitigations? So that becomes it was always there. Medical, FDA, we talked about this morning, it was always there. But now it's much, like I say, much more action-packed. Was there something you had?
Yeah, I just want to say,
Sure.
On the non-product software side, we document risk as well.
There you go.
For example, if an integration fails and that data is not on the complaint record,
Right,
for example,
right.
we do it in the form of a FMEA as well.
There you go.
Try and mitigate it with procedures and things.
So you're in medical, and you're using the FMEA.
To document non-product software risk.
There you go.
Absolutely, it's required.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, Bob, there's something just came out from Germany last week.
Well, I'd like to start out by saying here's the statistical part of the show for everybody. We've got some stats for you. The auto industry decided that the ISO 9001 2015 that came out didn't have teeth. So they wrote a whole bunch of requirements called the IATF 16, and there's a lot more new requirements. And so far, there's 3,000 audits that have been done to the IATF new standard. Now that seems like a lot, seeing as October 1st is a deadline when everybody's got to transition and start. But out of the 3,000 audits that have done so far, this is part of our playbook we want to share with you. Actually, if we go to the next slide, we can decode this. Now, this is coded in numerical. So, Rod, would you flip that slide to the next so we can, oh, it's up there. I was blind as a bat. So, on the top, there's top 10 majors. Everybody see that? So far, people are finding internal auditor competency as a major, TPM, that's total preventive maintenance, contingency plans, risk assessment, problem solving, customer specific requirements, product safety. So those are some of the big holes that need to be addressed with every one of the automotive companies that are going through their own gap analysis. And we want to show you a visual tool that helps people understand the requirements and tries to simplify it. And then down on the bottom, here's some of the top 10 minor nonconformities, and these came out of a meeting in Germany this week with the IATF and the registrars and some suppliers. And some of the minors you'll see are also from the top. You've got, again, TPM, control plans, product, production, contingency plan, process design, special characteristics. So there are some of the statistics that are already out that we wanted to share with you.
Real good. So again, we've got the majors and the minors, and there's repeats. The little red the red numbers are all repeats up in majors and minors. And then also, if you notice, this is out of the AIAG introduction to the IATF new standards, and they put an asterisk on anything that was new. They had a couple different ways of doing it. We just used a red asterisk. But if you look at the top 10, the asterisk, that's old school. What's the other one down here? Old school. The rest of these are all new requirements. So as you're developing your gap assessments, as you're developing your trainings, your competencies, your processes, documented processes, these are the kind of things that you have to build into the process. Got a question?
Yes. Where is this data coming from? The registrars? Where is the data coming from? The registrars or?
Coach?
The data came from a meeting in Germany this week from the IATF, which is the International Automotive Task Force. And there was suppliers at this meeting. There was the registrars, and there's the IATF OEMs all attended this. And they're trying to learn and make sure this transition is successful. You know, ultimately, they want to see improved product quality at the plants. You know, and and so this information just came out this week. And so I think, Rod, we can go to the next slide.
So again, this is just some baseline. I saw a couple people taking the pictures. Feel free to take the pictures, but if you want, we can mail this to you. We can mail you the gap tool, the checklist, so anything you want. You've got some contact information from us in the end. So this is just baseline rules that it shows the old version ISO 9001, and then the new version ISO 2015, and then the IATF 16949 2016 version follows the same pattern here. So this is nothing new here. It's what's in each one of those standards. Again, this should be basic block and tackle for quality management system at this point in time. Again, just another slide from the I-9 showing the inputs, the outputs, the process approach. And then we've got the PDCA, or the PDSA as I like to call it. Deming called it originally the Plan, Do, Study Act. And so let's see, Bob, you got something there? So about the risk-based thinking.
So I'd like to remind everybody, you know, when we've been working over the years, those of you that are, how many are in auto industry out there, by the way? Just about everybody. I'm sure that you are all aware that there's customer scorecards, right? And that's, you know, the auto industry sees that the, you know, when there's poor performance, you can basically boil it down to PPMs and on-time delivery. Good parts on time. That's kind of the simple way of thinking. It's like heartbeat and blood pressure. We've been thinking for a long time, they're just coming up with a new word called risk. I think we've all been thinking, you know, what is trouble? What is a problem? What is a corrective action? You know, how do we watch the corrective actions? How do we watch trends? So the overall, it's a change in thinking, but there's more emphasis on risk, whether it's a FEMA and a FEMA. You know, everybody know how to tell the difference between a good FEMA and a bad FEMA? Well, Greg does. Greg, I'm going to throw you a pass. You ready? Now, this is a Nerf football. That's Greg Porter right there. Holy smokes. So
That's why they keep losing.
So, Greg, you know the difference between a good FEMA and a bad FEMA? Of course you do. Greg's seen some bad FEMAs at our prior company.
Yeah, I've seen a lot, but the difference is hard. I mean,
yeah, it's the ones without any actions. When there's a high risk and then
Yeah.
there's no action taken, that's an example of what we'd call a bad FEMA. But anyways, this is just a slide that is just gearing you towards thinking about risk. I'd like everybody to think about color for a minute. Any finance people in here? When you see red ink, what do you think? Trouble. I want everybody to, all right, this is where crowd participation right now. Coach Rod, Coach Bob, we already have our color scheme. Rod, would you show us the risk color?
Risk, everything red.
When you see red, you see risk, okay? If you remember something, when you see red, you see risk. So anyways, next slide.
Okay, so what we wanted to do early on, and then we're going to get into the standard, show you some of the gap section by section, and there's a lot of detail there. We probably won't get through it all, but we wanted to show you some of the tools that you can use to set up the quality system effectively and efficiently. And so this is out of the old days. This came out of when we converted from QS 9000 to ISO TS 16949 2002. And they were starting to talk about the process approach. And so we basically took, I was at Bose at the time as a quality systems manager at the headquarters in Boston, but we took a team and we came up with, we actually had 54 processes, and that was way too many. So I think we narrowed it down somewhere around 21, 22 processes. And then we basically just took what you see, the Plan, Do, Study, Act. You've got your inputs circling around. You've got your continuous improvement, lessons learned, and then you've got your outputs. And this hasn't changed from the old days. There's probably some new processes that you would have in here, but that's the PDSA wheel approach. So a lot of people still use that. I went from Bose to Goodrich Aerospace, and we applied the same process approach to AS 9100, which was new for those folks and the registrar at the time that we had. But we converted the PDSA wheel to the swim lanes. So again, each one of these are your core processes. This is now from our design center. We're a remote support location in Farmington Hills, Michigan here for Flex. And so these are all of the core processes that we have. You've got management review, training. You see here where we've combined training, awareness, motivation. So that's all one process, and that's okay to do because it just says the organization shall have a documented process for awareness, for motivation. So we've got them all under the HR and the training. So again, we've got the swim lane approach and product safety. We've created a turtle for that. So what the turtles look like, this is cleaned up, but this is, as a design center, that's our #1 core process. So you've got your inputs, what kinds of procedures, and we've got a lot of procedures put down here, templates, etc. The standard, if you click on that now, it goes to the electronic version from AIAG, so everybody that's involved with this process, test, validation, and calibration, has access to the standard right from one turtle. So we call this the 60,000-foot view of QMS for that process. And then you've got the headers along here, your outputs, metrics. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but we've got 5 metrics. We got the 3 colors. I have been working with our legal, and when you put a lot of red in your registers, whether it's program management, engineering records, timing that isn't quite right, corrective actions, when you label all of that stuff red, it's a liability. And I always say I have a fiduciary responsibility to the company. So I've talked to legal. Should we be putting red on everything that we call red? It's not yellow. It's not red. Maybe it's something in between. So we've kind of got a progression here. Green comes down here as the effective metric. So as we assess the process with the owner, audit, management review, and our metrics are whatever's going on with the metrics, then at management review, we do this assessment, and is this process running green, effective and efficient? Is there an opportunity for improvement? And that you kind of can't see that there, but it's green, yellow. Is there a 4M, methods, material, and I'd say 5M, management responsibility for systemics, but you know, is there a concern? Is there, now we're getting into the red, is there a systemic concern? Is there a systemic breakdown? So we're trying to limit how much we're applying to a red. Should be something that is a systemic issue, and that should be a red flag to the executives in the management system. The other new thing, this is a brand new, this template came from our corporate quality group out in San Jose, but based on the requirements that every process will consider its risks, we can put that on a risk register. We just put it right on here. So we start out with, we'll show you a few others in a minute here. So, but this is the risk register. This is different. It's part of the template, but it would be different for each process owner. And just breaking that out a little bit further, the first risk is safety first, and that's just safety of the environment and the people. If you see something, get it to your manager, get it to facilities, get it corrected. So it's just that awareness starting out, safety first. And then it gets down into product safety first in design, and we go from there. The other thing that is common to every process owner's turtle, lack of, so it's basically you define what the risk is and then what's the control. So one of the concerns that I had from putting a quality management system in place is lack of department team awareness of their core process map and the training that goes into that. And then in their process map refers to all the other regulatory requirements, customer-specific requirements, so it's all in that one 60,000-foot view. What's the control? It's not my responsibility to train all the people. My responsibility is to work with the process owners, get them trained. Their responsibility is to train their people, and I'm happy to help. but then I go on vacation once I've trained all the process owners. It's their responsibility, it's their quality management system, it's all of our quality management system. So that's something that we baked in to every process, and I've trained each one of our process owners. We've done an audit. We're now into the management review cycle, actually next Wednesday. So then we get down into what are the product and service safety issues. So then the process owner, myself, others would sit down at the, this is a controlled document before we put it up under control. We itemize for this cycle, this quarter, this year, what are the issues that you would have with your process. So it's all recorded on one area. Anybody see an advantage to that?
Rod, Coach Rod, I'd like to say there's a lot of sick people out there. Everybody that I've ran into lately on the team seems to have proceduritis. That big honking binder, people don't want to read the big playbook. They do get a learning comes from a visual. You've shown some good examples how your team is using the visual approach to show how the process works rather than a big honking binder. So I like to just tell that joke about proceduritis because most of us have it. We don't like reading long procedures, but rather you've done a good job with your team using a visual approach.
Thanks, Coach. So the other thing just to highlight here is the owner that's sitting down on the other slide here. The owner is the engineering director. So I went to the vice president of engineering and I said, do you want to own this or who do you want? And it's not somebody down in the ranks. It's got to be an executive. We've got excellent engagement by our engineering director who thinks quality all the time. But again, the key to the success of now the transition to IATF, you got to have the executives engaged in their quality management system. So that's one way we've done it. Okay, so then from every one of the core processes that we have, engineering, purchasing, sales quote, management review, internal audits, every one of the processes has at management review a 4-panel report, the old painter chart. I think that came from Ford back in the day, painter chart. And basically, where are we? What's the root cause? And then what are our actions to do something about it? That gets baked up into the management review. But that's the template that we use, and we meet on a quarterly basis, and then we track. We're using this scale here now, but we would track quarter by quarter every one of the processes, how we're doing. And if anybody wanted an example of that, I could show you a kind of a neutralized version. We got a scorecard here. Coach Bob.
I'd like to get some crowd participation. I know you guys just had lunch and you're all sleepy. What do you guys see up there? Anyone? We have free prizes. Each one of these has a gift certificate. You know, anybody want to volunteer? What do you see? That guy out there, let's throw him a football.
I'm going to get where I can
Get
actually
him a microphone and a football with a gift certificate. That gift certificate is not for the Ford Wall of Shame.
Well, I'm not in automotive, I'm in beer, but what I see is a heat map that shows there looks to be a good amount of green there. There's some yellow, and then there's a bunch of red saying that's probably where you should focus on fixing whatever that red is a problem.
You're right on target. You're part of the beer city, I take it. Right here from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Kalamazoo.
Kalamazoo, great town, great town. Like that. What brewery are you from?
Bell's Brewery.
Bell's, great music there too.
Yes, sir.
These are customer scorecards. This is just a simulated. That could be Ford, Fiat Chrysler, VW. We all get scorecards, those of us that work in industry, once a month. We like to read them, right? And some of the issues might not all be accurate, so sometimes you're disputing what would be called if you have a spill or a PPM bad issue. But when you see red, you're seeing risk. And I want everybody to think also, it's not just when you see red. If you start seeing a negative trend, that can also be a risk. So reds and yellows, Most of the automotive scorecards are in dashboard format and color. So if you can simplify your thinking, you don't have to be rocket science people. Like, for example, Rod, being from Bose, a quality assurance scientist. Rod, I'm sure you know how fast the spaceship Galileo can go top speed.
22,000 miles an hour?
22,000 miles per hour with no brakes. Well, there's a little bit of risk for you, but I wouldn't want to be driving that spaceship. But the whole point of it is, unacceptable risk is what we're supposed to be taking action on. The old school, we'd take corrective action, right? So really, we've been doing this stuff called risk all along, so I don't want to make it over simple, but that's a way to see this in color, and we're trying to brainwash everybody in our presentation to bring away something. And even with your own internal metrics, if this was your own report card, or your child's or your college student's report card, and of course they don't give that to us anymore, right? That's you have to get special permission. But whenever you see poor scorecards, what's being done about it? So that's a key to working this, and I think your automotive customers would agree. Look at those scorecards with a particular importance every month.
Good stuff. Thank you.
I'm concerned about all the green on there. I'd like to see a lot more maize and blue.
That guy football,
There you go. Okay, so basically the three-part, you have your interactive map, whether it's a PDSA wheel or the swim lanes, but you got your interactive map that shows all of the interactions at a high level. And then you've got your turtles, and then your, whether it's the scorecards or your internal metrics. Again, the key is the executive management buy-in. I've been fortunate in my career in automotive, aerospace, and back now into automotive to have executives that really buy into the kind of thing that we were trying to do. And we weren't trying to create a new quality system on the side. What is the management system? Bose is a pretty successful operation. Goodrich Aerospace, very successful operation, as is Flex. So we got to be doing a whole lot of stuff right. My job is to try to figure out how to marry that into the system so that we're making it easy for everybody. And then again, this guy here, the turtle, is a 60,000-foot view that the owner and all of his or her team need to be able to tell that story. Know the story, tell the story, live the story. So we get the buy-in, policy deployment, kind of a Toyota way, top down, really does work. The executives at Bose, I went to the automotive president. He assigned general managers and directors for all of our processes there. Made my job real easy because the president assigned who were going to be the owners. So I did the same thing at Flex. I went to the VPs. Who do you want to own the sales process? Who do you want to own the engineering process? Key step. And then we've got the process owners. They lead their own teams. They present at management review. I don't. I tee everything up. I flip the slides like I'm doing here. It's their responsibility. They have the four-panel chart. They talk to their root causes of whatever their trends are. And even if it's a good trend, it's a good thing to talk about. Why is it a good trend? Maybe somebody else in another department needs to learn how to get his or her trend in the right direction too. The other thing, I didn't put it on here, but a couple years back we started to experiment. When we complete our internal audit, as Michelle was saying this morning from Toyota, have that two-way conversation with the auditor, the auditee. And the auditee understands at the closing meeting, I'm not presenting the nonconformances. I'm presenting the summary, and then I turn it over to the process owner that had 2 or 3 nonconformances. They report out what the findings were that we agreed to. So again, it's another step of getting engagement from the auditee, process owner, getting their understanding of what the audits are. So again, everything is tailored to the process owner's engagement in their quality management system. So, Coach Bob, what do you think of that? Is that a good process?
Well, some of us like to go right for the metrics. You know, how many of you have done your gap analysis? Anybody started on that? Show of hands. You probably already have metrics. Now, as you know, there's more emphasis now on both the efficiency and the effectiveness. So if you have a metric for PPM, and that's the effect, you know, if your PPM is single-digit PPMs, that's probably good. You know, and if then you got to think, what's your efficiency metric? Could be cost of poor quality, right? So there's more emphasis on this efficiency effectiveness. But yeah, this is a very good approach. You know, Coach Rod brings to you a lot of good experience and visuals, and that's part of the presentation when we get to the gap analysis, how you can train your teams and work through the new requirements. But we've got to look at all these new requirements. There's at least 50 new requirements by the time most people do their gaps and boil it down to a Gantt chart. And then you've got to deploy these requirements amongst many people, and then you got to check the effectiveness of it. So yeah, overall it's a very effective, but part of it is with the new people don't like change, and this is at a time when everybody's extremely busy. So it's a big step, a lot of stuff to do.
Keep on going there, buddy.
Well, this one here just shows you the sections of the new ISO 9000 standard. And as you see at the bottom of the slide, this gap tool that we've put together is a visual, it is a pictorial tool instead of just being a requirements verification matrix. For example, if you go to AIAG and you ask for their gap tool, you get a Excel spreadsheet with 931 numbers on it. And then you got to get out your secret decoder ring to figure out what all the numbers mean and how did they break up 415 requirements into 900 some. So we decided, Rod and I took this on to break it down and put together this gap tool, and so that you can assign process owner responsibility and you get through the whole thing, and then you put it on a Gantt chart, keep it simple. So keep rolling.
Is anybody using that?
Yeah, I've worked about 3 companies so far through using that. But let's go to the next slide.
Okay. So again, you can see the risk is baked in everywhere. We talked about it a little bit with you guys. Okay, so understanding the organization and its context, that's a new section. So they started out with that. Looking at internal, external issues, purpose, its strategy, what's the strategy, all of that. Good, successful companies have all that, so all we have to do is pull that down, bring it into the standard, and organize it. So again,
Rod, something's very scary up on the screen there on your action.
what's that?
Why did you make it October 31st, Halloween? Is that a special occasion, or?
I like to do things in good timing.
So I can see the crowd is getting awfully excited at break time. You know, I think there's, what, a 2:15 for a little break? But I'd like to challenge everybody in your thinking here for a minute. This IATF, does anybody know who that is? Come on, we got footballs for everybody. It's General Motors, Ford, Fiat, Chrysler, BMW, PSA, which is Peugeot, you know, French. And then there's BMW. So there's like the European and the U.S. make up the IATF. There you go. Good. Look at that. Come on, give it up for Coach Rod here, all the way from Boston, Massachusetts. We've got a lot of people out in the simulcast. This is being simulcast. You can share it with your friends. But there's a saying here, you know. So now that you know it was TS 16949, now it's IATF. Rod, I have an important question for you. What does IATF stand for in Detroit?
Boy, I don't know. What
it
is
ain't that funny.
Ain't that funny?
It ain't that funny, but it's out. That's not it. So cut that out
that's
of the
funny.
video. But anyways, next slide, please.
Okay. Okay, so again, we talked about this is you got to get your quality manual in order, and I don't know if everybody is going to do this. It's not a requirement. It's a way we've done it. The QMS structure brings all of this together. We'll show you that. So again, this is part of the header of our QMS structure in Farmington Hills. We're a remote support location. This is what we have as our scope. I'm sorry, this is the headquarters, this is their scope, this is our scope here. We're product design, purchasing, contract, sales, quote. And then this is the type of products that we have. So that's kind of just a header, and then here's the key customer-specific requirements that we live to, again, at a remote support location from designing.
And keep in mind, Coach Rod, when we were looking at the statistics from the earlier game, 3,000 audits done so far worldwide. That includes China, all over the globe. So I don't know how many people are overachievers that wanted to just jump right in and do their IATF 16949 audits, but apparently there's 3,147 companies that have already done their audit, and the lessons they've learned are some pretty hard kicks. And one of them is in customer-specific requirements. That's always a tough one for companies, you know, to see what's the new supplier quality manual say, what's the new requirement. And that was one of the majors that we saw, and now it's got to be real clear in your quality manual, as does that relationship to your sales office or warehouses. Those are called remote supporting locations. The auto industry's always been sticky on that. They want to see all this interrelationship between not only the headquarters, but the warehouse, the sales office. So all that stuff is baked into the new quality manual, or at least a process map. And Rod's done a good job of keeping that big honking binder for his team, that playbook, condensed and visual.
Okay, thanks. So the interested parties, we've got to talk about our interested parties in this section 4. So again, this is right from our corporate, so that gets pulled into the structure. And again, interested parties. So you got a whole lot of different ones here, and you could say voice of the VOS, voice of the supplier. We talked about that with Toyota this morning. When it comes to accounts payable, the supplier becomes our customer. We said we're going to pay them on time, net 90 term, whatever. Did we pay them on time? Are we keeping that partnership alive with proper discipline and accountability? But again, voice of the system covers an awful lot of areas.
Coach Rod?
Yep.
You mentioned the voice of the registrar before. Do you think the voice of the registrar always has the voice of reason?
I would say the ones I've worked with have.
Well, that's good to know. But it's one thing for everybody to know. Right now, the auto industry has not come up with frequently asked questions or sanction interpretations yet for this new standard, and there's a lot of gray area. So that means every auditor that's out there should be very objective about this new standard, because there's a lot to learn with it. There's a lot of gray area. And we were talking to Dan Reed, for ex-GM guy. He was the IATF guy for a lot of years. And he was in agreement that, you know, we've got a job to do to be objective, but companies that are implementing this new standard have got to stand firm and stand their ground on this is how we're doing this, because this is plain vanilla. This is a standard that could work anything from semiconductors to steel mills. And so everybody that's implementing, stand your ground. Your registrar does not run your business. The registrar should be working with you to make certification easier, not harder. And that's why we're saying is get with them up front. They may have a... So anyway, this meeting in Germany this week, hopefully we'll learn some more, and the auto industry will give us all some guidance, so we're all not having to struggle quite so much. But stand your ground.
Okay, so part of the finishing up with the QMS structure, and again, this is about the remote support locations. This is how we identify. It's kind of a matrix that we've used, but this is what we do in Farmington. This is what we do in Farmington Hills. These are the manufacturing contacts, and I've made up names here, but these are the manufacturing sites. We have sales in all of those. We're a design center for 4 of them, and we do purchasing for most of them. And we have other design centers around the world. They have to set up their own matrix. But from a registrar organization point of view, this is a critical slide. I've seen major findings when one of our facilities in Mexico doesn't identify us as a design center or doesn't identify us as a sales quote process. They've gotten minors, and then they finally get majors, because this is very difficult for a company that's got multiple standards, 220,000 people around the world. We keep acquiring companies every few months, and trying to package that all together and communicate is a challenge. But
Coach Rod?
Yes, sir.
Just a quick point for everybody. There's a little simple analogy for this, what I call a spaghetti diagram sometimes, but your own process map should match the certificate that you have hanging on the wall, and that should be a reality. So the reality check is the auditor comes in, looks at your certificate, it should match your supporting locations, warehouses, sales office. So your own process map should match your certificate and reality. And then every time you fill in an audit planning form for one of your registrar folks, that's supposed to match. So it becomes a huge matching game. I call it Where's Waldo? But if you do that simple trick, your own process map should now match the certificate and keep that up to date, and with the reality of the constant change of modern organizations. That's just a simple way to think of boiling it down. Why is it there, and what do we have to do with it?
Okay. What's that?
You're going to give that guy an extra football.
Yeah. Okay. Are we supposed to take a break? Was it on the? Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. Customer specific requirements.
Does everybody see the red star up there? There's a red star up there. Anybody go to the what was that meeting they had in Detroit there with?
It was a two-day AIAG
Summit.
kickoff summit.
So when they kicked it off, they used the red stars, and those were new requirements. We sort of took the IATF. Part of this presentation is based on what we went to in Detroit. And so when you see the red star on this, new requirement, although customer specifics are still an old requirement, we've had to do them for a long time.
It's repackaged.
Now you have to have a documented process. The meetings I've been going to, I get to go to meetings a lot with the auto industry, and we get kicked, a little bit hard every now and then. There's a term called soft grading. The auto industry says that we just aren't doing enough. We aren't writing enough findings and not tough enough. But anyway, one of the things I'd like to share with you that they have said, if companies don't have a documented process, that's a requirement, that should be a major nonconformance. Well, I kind of wonder about that. I wonder if that meets the definition of a major nonconformance, if it's a major system breakdown or shipment of nonconforming product. But that's the approach the auto industry has taken. So those 22 documented processes that Rod shared with you, that one slide, you're supposed to have a documented process for each one of those, or you can combine them like Rod said. So that's an important point about customer-specific requirements. And they actually built some of them into the IATF standard.
So what we did, again, just as a trick, a tool to use, is we've got an Excel spreadsheet, but it's on our QMS website, and then we list all of the clients that we have, and then what we do is we get the new standards. There was a new, I think it was General Motors just came out last week, so we reviewed that. We had 2 people review it. We put it up into the folder in this system, and there's a record of the review. So the record of the review is primarily for not only just good record keeping, but it shows from a liability point of view that we're trying to monitor, stay on top of these things. And that's something that will always get asked during an audit, especially the new IATF. How are you managing your customer specific requirements? And believe me, the lead auditors coming in from the registrars know the timing of the last update from Ford or FCA or Ford. They know when the last one was there. So they're going to be asking, do you know? And can you show me the objective evidence? Now you're doing that from an audit point of view, but as our engineering director says, I don't want to do it because the audit is forcing me to do it. I want to do it because it's a best practice. So it is a best practice to review it. In the medical industry, you have to review it, and then you have to show a record. So that's how we've tried to do it.
And deploying it with the team is then the key. So for example, if GM says you got to keep your records for 50 years, for us, might have a records matrix that's 50 years, or if they say if you're plastics injection molding and you've got to do this molding annual assessment, CQI, whatever it is, molding, then you've got to do that. You're supposed to also internal audit those customer specifics, your very own selves. So what's next, Rod?
Okay, so basically it's another new one. And again, when it says new, you can really go back and say, hey, look, it's always been there, but they've added to, but it's conformance to products and processes, and ensure conformance process through a proactive approach, and again, assessing the risks. So what I like to think of is those handoff points. So, the handoff point is where the risk happens, or the shuttle. I always go back to the shuttle tragedy years ago. It was an O-ring. It's that point where things are coming together and are supposed to be fitting properly. And so there's a good handoff point from a football analogy, but we can think of those in any one of our processes. So when I go from the sales quote over to program management, from program management over into engineering, there's outputs to inputs. That's a handoff point. And we find internally those are key areas of nonconformity or nonconformance.
Speaking of handoff, it's break time. Why don't everybody take 10 minutes, get a soda, come on up and get a complimentary football. And we appreciate your time here. And big hand for Jim and Joe back there that put on this show in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's been a great conference. Get big hand for Jim, Joe. All right, take a break. Thank you.
So 10 minutes?
Yeah, no problem. For you, Captain Joe, give me one of the military vehicles. Just a test drive. I'll take a cruise over there to Oshkosh on the boat next week. You could buy it for sale. Several $1 million. Hey, thanks for participating, Greg. That was awfully brave.
Well, I thought you were.
Tell the difference between a good team and a bad team. I thought you were going to say there's
Ready? No, well,
Good things we got going on, some of the IT things.
All right, everybody. We're here for second half with Rod and Robert. Take it away, guys.
okay. So we're going to speed up the pace a little bit. There's a lot to get through. We'll try to hit every slide. Again, we have it in a gap tool, so if there's anything that you see a topic and you say, hey, what about that one, just stop us. We can answer something specific. Product safety, again, this is a defined, documented process as required. And again, as an example, we've got FMVSS's, Canadian standards now. We just learned of India regulations for infotainment systems. For crash protection, we do harnesses. We do harnesses inside of transmissions, solenoids inside of transmissions. So you've got transmission requirements that we now are accountable for. And folks didn't know that we were accountable. We had conversations with lawyers that our legal brought in, lawyers from Brussels, London, Washington, D.C., and corporate. And we had 90 minutes with 7 lawyers talking with all of our QMS owners about what we do, what our products are, and is this regulatory stuff for the OEMs only? Because that doesn't apply to us as a tier 1 or a tier 2. And the lead lawyer said, it applies to all of you. It's the supply chain and how do we interact with the system, the systemic FMEA. So we've learned a lot about regulatory. We've bought the handbook. We're educating our folks. We're doing reviews, design reviews now, feasibility reviews. All of that is getting baked in, a whole new level of regulatory awareness, review, understanding, and then are there design impacts and manufacturing processes built around that. So this is a way of collecting and keeping it. All of these are links for all of our folks. Okay, I'm going to jump over this real quick, but I just heard this from a benchmarking point of view. We can go out and learn from others. The 4 naval ship collisions that we've happened. I heard them talking on the radio. They've come to a root cause. Perked up my ears from a quality point of view. Root cause: they did away with classroom training back in the 2000s, early 2000s. They gave all of their new navigation folks 21 CDs. Go learn everything you need to know about driving a big honking ship with all kinds of complexities to it. And they've now found that was a wrong decision. So they first said it was training. How many folks ever hear, oh, root cause, training, retrain the operators? And I've said, I'll accept retrain the operators if you retrain his manager and the manager retrains the operator. That has to be baked into your 8D or your problem solving. So the takeaway for us, and we put this up in our benchmarking folder because now there's a requirement that you have a benchmarking. Doesn't say documented process, but how are you benchmarking others? So this is a way of benchmarking. And the takeaway is we're getting into autonomous vehicles, designing. We have our first embedded software. So our engineers, program managers, manufacturing folks, quality people, they have to be well skilled. So do we give them 21 CDs? And my approach is send them to classroom training. And that's how I've learned over the years, and the lead auditors especially, that's baked into our process. You go to a 4 or a 5-day, preferably AIAG course where you're interacting with other automotive folks, you're interacting with third-party folks that are there, and you learn an awful lot. Now that might be because I'm a slow learner and that's a good way for me to learn, but it's done me really well, and it's done all of our lead auditors well that I've been working with over the years. So we talked about safety recalls. Anything that you guys come to your mind as recalls that, in your industries, your businesses? Shout it out.
Most common would be overcarbonated packages of beer. Pardon me. It's happened lately. Overcarbonated packages of beer get contaminated with the wild yeast. Presents quite a consumer hazard, in fact.
There you go. There you go. Would you guys have thought that through from a proactive risk assessment, or you learned it from the recalls?
I'd say some of both. We in fact, we experienced it once, and through that, invested quite a bit of
There you go.
effort and capital into putting things in place to detect it and catch it and not let it happen again.
Okay, good example. Okay, just real quick, product safety, it's a documented process, now required. So there's another turtle. Easy way to create a documented process for anything, any of the 21 required. Okay, we've talked about some of the gaps, so we'll move on. We're getting into the leadership now, and I thought that was a real nice presentation. I don't know how many folks were here to hear the Toyota leadership this morning from Michelle, but that was excellent. And these are baked in. We're not going to read them now, but they're baked into some of the other slides that we have. But top management is accountable to the QMS. We hold top management accountable for identifying who needs to be owning the process maps. So, and management at our facility is engaged obviously with the management reviews, actions that are needed, support that we need. One of the supports we got from our management was go out and get everything on electronic from AIAG so everybody has access. I call that management engagement. Okay. Corporate responsibility, we'll just jump through that a little bit. Product, I think this, Bob, is yours, product efficiency and effectiveness and efficiency.
We talked about this already in an earlier slide, but you know, everybody's got metrics, KPIs, objectives, whatever you call them. And now there's more emphasis that there was always a requirement for it, but it wasn't well enforced in the past standard, but they're putting more emphasis on having efficiency and effectiveness metrics. So can anybody think of, for on-time delivery, what would be an efficiency metric? Effectiveness would be, if you're 100% on time, what would be an efficiency? Any volunteers? Anybody want a football? How about a green ball? Oh, that would be a hazard. This would be a risk to throw that one. That's
We got a question
hard.
over here.
Greg's got an answer.
Cost of premium freight.
Premium freight, excellent. Good.
Okay.
Next slide.
Process owners, again, we've talked about this. Make sure that they understand their role and are competent. So we've run them through what the requirements say from IATF. And when I say IATF, it also is the base standard. And again, we talked about this, that every process owner has this responsibility to be trained. I train them, and then I'll help train their team if they want to send them to, out of office training or someplace else, that's fine. But now when I put on my auditor's hat and I come back 6 months later and I'm auditing this process, whatever the process is, and I'm sitting down with the process owner and now the workforce in that group, I'm looking at, in part, do they understand the overall magnitude of the turtle, their core process map? Excuse me. So I train up the owners, then the process owners, they set the time and agenda if they want, and I'll assist, but the owner is responsible for ensuring his or her team is trained. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So it also engages the executives in their quality management system again. Oh, so this is a Coach Rod quote. There's two parts to my role, and that is to engage executive management in their quality management system, and the second part is make sure my resume is always up to date in case one fails. So there you go. Okay, roles, responsibilities, authority, Coach Bob?
Well, as you know, Rod, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. If people don't know what their responsibilities are for these new requirements, how are they going to get done? It's that simple. It's making sure people understand not only their responsibilities and how you deploy that, but also the authority. You don't want a guy that's on the line. He needs to change a drill bit to make good parts. If he's not authorized to change the drill bit, what's going to happen? Just waste of time, might keep making bad parts. Let's move on.
Okay. So this is a halftime. I don't know how many people have seen this, but Coach Bo, it's all about the team, the team, the team. So think about that from a QMS point of view. And every day we get better or we get worse. Here's one of those worst moments. It don't get any worse than that.
How many fumbles did anybody see? Did anybody count?
6?
6 fumbles.
So that was our halftime. We were running just a little bit late on our halftime there. Okay, so we're going to go into the planning. And again, these next, this one here is a monster. So we'll try to move fast. And again, the gap tool has all of these and more defined, and then you have a gap sitting down here to work from. So just think of it in that way. So Bob, anything about planning, risk? I guess we've talked about that quite a bit already.
Let's move on. Keep them rolling fast.
Okay. So a risk analysis, again, that's a kind of a revised. It's not red. It's a gold star. It's a modified section. Objective evidence, retain documented information of your risk results. So again, a medical risk register that you would have of some sort, but you've got a FEMA you can show, engineering records, manufacturing, you would have a PFEMA, you could have a PFEMA.
Rod, I have a question from the simulcast. It says, is proactive reviews of customer-specific requirements still required? If yes, what section of the standard applies?
Okay.
So my opinion is that we've already reviewed the customer specifics. I forget the clause number, but if you look up in the index of the standard, it does talk about the customer specific requirements. And a proactive review, I suppose that would mean, like yesterday on the IATF.org website, everybody knows that, right? If you get the ones with the Hawks and the Falcons, it's the wrong one. It's the one with the cars. But the General Motors came out with a new one this week, and that's effective November of 2017. So proactive review would be knowing about it and when it's effective. And then also Volkswagen, did I say that in the proper way? Volkswagen also came out with their new customer-specific requirement, and I'm not sure what the effective date is, but the standard has more emphasis on customer-specific requirements. In fact, they've even required a documented process, so I would say yes, it applies, and the section of the standard that talks about customer specifics is the section that's applicable.
To add to that, being proactive, set yourself up with IATF. You can go into the IATF, www.iatf.org, and set up for automatic notices. So and I got one as it came out, and we had people that were reviewing it. So again, that would be how I would be showing objective evidence that I'm being as proactive as I can. I get the notice, I review it, put the record in file, communicate it to the appropriate folks that need to know.
So part of our statistics from earlier in the program, we shared with you one of the major nonconformances so far in audits is the risk. I don't think it's just the risk that's the major nonconformance. It's the unmitigated risk. When there's unacceptable risk, if there's red scorecard, if you're in the tank with Ford on a PPM or in the tank on on-time delivery, that's where an action plan is needed. My guess would be the major nonconformance would be if there's a major issue with a customer scorecard, or it could even be an internal metric where it's a big problem and there's a lack of action taken. That's the type of finding that would seem to make sense. That would be my guess. We don't have the details, but let's move on to the next slide.
Okay, preventative action, contingency plans, that is new, right? That's a new documented process?
Well, no, it's not a documented process, Rod. What's new is they've added a few things to the contingency plan because there's been some shutdowns of some auto plants. They've added some new things. But the most important thing is now they've added a requirement to periodically test that contingency plan, and that could be a tabletop test. And one of the things Rod and I like to encourage everybody to do is mistake-proof your quality systems. Why would you want to do that? Because we are all human. I admit myself, I make a lot of mistakes with my team every day. And the more that you can use automation, if you have Buyin or if you have SAP and a quality module or even a maintenance system that will send reminders to people to do things, that's something that you can do to help mistake-proof your quality system. If you have a simple one test once a year, put it in a maintenance reminder system, or if you put it in Outlook, as soon as somebody quits, then that Outlook reminder goes away. So that's just an idea to mistake-proof your own quality systems.
Okay, so planning, anything from a planning point of view that seems to be out there really, really brand new? Okay. Support, section 7. Okay, so environment of the operation, for the operation of the process, suitable environment for human physical factors. And if you look at some of the things that they're looking at, this is a note, but these are the kind of things that we're supposed to be mindful of, not only from obviously good business practices, but also from an auditing point of view. And I'm challenged with this. How do I actually audit for, to tell if somebody is burned out? Now, I can kind of see the signs, but this is a note, so it's not a requirement, but it's leading us in a whole new direction of the quality management system.
Coach Rod, you're going to have to be a very emotionally sensitive guy in your next round of internal audits. You know, that's stress-free, burnout prevention, emotionally protective. Yeah, that's not a requirement. It's only a note. I don't know if you got that, but that was like, you know, it's one of those psychological factors. They put it in as a requirement in the standard, but since it's a note, it's not really a requirement. It's nice to have because nobody wants to burn out employees. Nobody likes high turnover. My take on this as a U.S. citizen, as a you know, person of protector of the, you know, my fellow human beings, is that I do not want to have people leave my company. They're a valuable asset. And, you know, safety first for people. So how you read these words can be interpreted, but it's one of those things where a lot of executives look at that and laugh. But really, safety first is my message to you all. And I want to make sure you all drive home safely and don't drink too much beer in Kalamazoo, right? Just the right amount.
So again, the blue is, again, a note of a bit of a change. Not much. I mean, it was in the old TS requirements. Calibration, verification, documented process. I think all of us probably have had that as a record anywhere, including software installed in employee-owned or customer-owned equipment.
So that's a new one that's come back. Does anybody remember when software used to be in the calibration requirements back in the QS days? No good memory here, but it used to be there. Now it's come back. Everybody know what that means? If you got a series of devices and it's got software, measurement software, you're supposed to somehow validate that as part of, verify it as part of the calibration process.
And that's good business practices for the medical industry now. Competence supplemental is a documented process. This is a supplement of what? 721. Awareness. Oh, okay. So this is about the quality policy, kind of motherhood and apple pie. Plan, do, check, act. So again, your process rather than procedure. So again, they're trying to get us out of the thinking mode of it's about procedures, but more about the processes. Internal auditor competency, I take this one very seriously because I'm looking at the standard, the regulatory requirements, the customer specific. I mentioned General Motors customer specific refers to another General Motors document on records management. So I had to go in and look at that, go down through the 2 pages of General Motors records that we are responsible for maintaining at various levels. Now we do that pretty well because of our flex records management policy. But again, from an auditing point of view, an internal auditor needs to be able to understand this stuff so that they know how to ask the right questions to understand, is the organization doing at least the minimal types of things that they need to be doing? So there's a lot there. And again, I stress the 4 to 5 day class and make sure the core tools as part of the AIAG structure. When you take a 5 day or 4 day class, you get the core tool training, the MSA, the SPC, PPAP, all of those.
And if anybody's read the GM customer specifics, it also goes into the manufacturing process audits, layered process audits. Even those people have to be considered competent in some way. Doesn't mean they have to know everything. Nobody knows everything, but you've got to define at least some minimum level. It's hard, for example, to justify a person that's going to go out and audit a manufacturing process that's never worked in a manufacturing, and a lot of that happens these days. You know, a clerk or a janitor sent out and say, here, go take care of the checklist. That's not the intent. So let's move to the next slide.
Well, just a couple other things here. The subject matter experts got to have auditing competency in the customer specific CQIs, regulatory, and in our case, we have a requirement for functional safety, ISO 26262. So I have to be able to go out and audit, and I have to have that base. I now have a 5 day training along with my lead auditor, and I'm going to do some observation audits of subject matter expert functional safety folks. The auditor skills, Michelle from Toyota had talked about it this morning. When you're auditing, it's not just about auditing and gotchas, but helping the auditee think through. That comes a lot from the problem solving. AAG's got a real good guidelines, CQI 2021. It's being pulled back down into just one document now. So that's a lot for an auditor to know. And I'm not sure that we as organizations have comprehended that yet. And it's my job, it's our jobs as QMS reps to make sure that our leaders do and that they're giving the approval to proper training for our auditing teams. Second party audits, Bob?
The same thing applies. Same thing applies for second-party auditors, that they should be qualified. If you're going to send folks out to your problem suppliers, again, they need to meet the requirements that the company sets up as a minimum.
Okay, so again, we talked about employee motivation, empowerment. We've got a process map, again, a turtle for training, awareness, empowerment, motivation. So we've combined those together in one process. So this is our overall HR and training. And then we get into the supplementals. We have a code of ethics. So again, use what your organization already has. So our code of ethics talks about every one of these things. And then obviously the JDOCA, are our people able to stop the process, whatever that is? So again, that's how we've put together, packaged different process documents that are now required into a combo turtle. Quality management system is a documented process. So what would a quality manual look like today, Bob?
It wouldn't be a big honking binder anymore, I wouldn't hope. As you've shown us some examples, could be a nice, thin, small quality manual, upper level, with process maps, some procedures. And what takes probably the most space in quality management systems is the recipes, the drawings, the prints, the how you make a good product. That's at the level of, that's part of the quality management system too. The bill of materials and the drawings and the prints and the recipes. So those are all part of it. So the upper level is, that's the quality manual, the process maps, the procedures. When you send to your certifying professionals the documented quality manual and the procedures up front before your transition audit, you probably want to ask them for their transition checklist to make sure you're covering their requirements and there's no misunderstandings. So when you're doing your gap, it's a good idea to get that list from it could be a 2-page document. Greg, how long is yours there, Intertech, your transition?
3 pages.
Three
That's a
pages.
nice short one. Some of them are 15, some of them are 20.
We have 2 versions. We have a long version. Yeah, we have 2 versions, the short version and the long version. Depends upon your level of knowledge and what you need help with.
I like the short version, but
I'll probably take the longer version. Okay, so moving on. Engineering specifications, documented process, something new on here. That's always been something we do in an engineering world, but
10 days, everybody vote for 10 days. Is that what it was? And is that the same? Nobody knows. Somebody out there in the simulcast world says, Rod, you're winning. Says you're getting more votes. We got some simulcast questions coming in.
that's good.
But those engineering specifications are not considered the customer-specific requirements. For example, if there's a General Motors spec for corrosion protection or surface protection or what Dan Reed would call a green spec, it might be a material spec, they make changes in specifications, not just always on the drawing. So, a lot of companies get a subscription to the engineering specs for the Ford or the FCA, and that's how you keep up to date with those. So it's 10 days that we're supposed to, and that was, I think, on the list of statistics that we shared with you. Let's move on.
Okay, so we got 10 minutes to go through a whole lot of stuff. We're not going to do it. Okay, again, you're going through that in your mindset. What are the gaps in those requirements as you look down through the requirements documents, the gap document, your auditing checklist? Any of those would be good tools. Operations, this one we're going to blow through real quick. Manufacturing feasibility. It's looking at what are the risks and talking about that at management reviews, making sure that the feasibility is something that is done up front. I like this slide. This is from Omnex. A fighter jet has 1.7 million lines of code. A 2009 Mercedes, 20 million. So tells you where we're going in our industry. Are my auditors competent to audit the manufacturing process? Are your auditors? That's a risk, and we need to be talking about that. We need IT folks to be coming into the quality system. So it is a risk. It's, in our case, it could be SPICE. We're 26262. How do we contract? How do we create statement of works around all of this new stuff? What is our software competency within the organization? Auditor competency. So those are questions to ask. Special characteristics, they've been around for a long time. You got the old football playbook, but you've got your characteristics matrices that we all have worked to for many years in the automotive industry. Supplier selection, this is a big new, there's probably 4 or 5 subsections, maybe more. We're going to blow through this pretty quick, but you've got to start thinking about, one, it's a documented process. I think it always was, but there's a bit of a new emphasis here. Extent of control for, it talks about outsourced processes. So that's, again, your suppliers, okay? Bob?
The thought is from the auto industry, and if you go to the AIAG, you can see what we call the minimum requirements for automotive suppliers. Like everybody's had to have ISO 9001. Ford and FCA have this new document that is the minimum requirement for automotive supplier, what I call ISO Plus. It's just an easy way of saying it. What it is, it's ISO 9000 plus core tools. And the expectation when we get to the next slide is that over time, we're going to develop all of our sub-tier suppliers to not only ISO 9001, but to the next step of ISO 9000 plus core tools, then eventually all the second, third, fourth tier suppliers all the way down to the ground, all the way down to the iron ore is going to have IATF 16949. I think we know that's not going to happen. The approach is they've now made an emphasis on second party audits if you have suppliers that are not going to do that. Now, can you get to the step slide? That's an example visually. So over a 3-year plan, for example, and the standard doesn't say exactly how much time or which suppliers that you pick to do this with. I think there's flexibility in this supplier development, and this is, you know, not been completely hashed out for what companies is the best practice yet. But the thing that I like to say is, who are your bad guy suppliers, right? I mean, that's simple thinking. Who are your bad guy suppliers? Those are your higher risk suppliers. And then if you have a new supplier, that might be higher risk. But over time in the auto industry right now, they have to be ISO 9001. Then you're going to have to be ISO 9000 plus, then IATF 16. And if not, then you have to do second party audits. So it's putting more emphasis on the supply chain. The reason why? Because there's a lot of spills and bad parts making it to assembly plants that are coming from the second and third tiers.
Okay, so good stuff there. So, supplier monitoring, another documented process, and you can combine these all into one. Second party audits we've talked about here a little bit. We're going to just move through that unless somebody has something. Supplier development, so that's part of that overall supplier assessment process. You assess them, you monitor them, you develop them as you need. Okay, I don't assume there's any questions at this point. Standard work, going to move on with that. Verification after shutdown. Let's see, we had a major there, so verification of job setup, so that's something that's got to be considered. And verification after the shutdown. Total preventative maintenance, that was a hit in both major and minor, so that's a new requirement, and it's getting hit as a major. Control of changes, again, change control, documentation control, customer-specific controls, all of that is just bake the new requirements into what we already do for the TS standards.
And the emphasis of the playbook with the manufacturing folks is very important because parts are made on the shop floor, and if bad parts are going to escape through the plant, some of these things with last-off inspection is now a requirement. The verification of setup. These are some critical changes, and we saw that in the statistics earlier from the earlier part of the playbook. And so where the parts are made, these are some critical changes. You know, this group understands that in the manufacturing and auto industry, the emphasis is on production. We've got to spend a certain amount of time in the production process when we're doing audits, and they're the fast, you know, that's who we are all supporting. Those of us that are not working in manufacturing are supporting manufacturing. So anyway.
Okay, we got 4 minutes to go. Rework and repair is got a new emphasis. Customer notifications where required. Okay, and there's one, the TREAD Act.
TREAD Act, I'd like everybody, if you look at the end of this presentation, the US DOT website, you can look up recalls, you can look up types of automotive industry issues, you can learn what type of products are safety-related products, whether it's lighting, batteries, glass, tires, airbags, see if your own car's under a recall. You can even take the pledge not to text and drive.
Okay, so we're going to move quickly. Okay, so we're at the end here, so we're going to jump to performance evaluation. Customer satisfaction, we talked about that before, looking for the trends, the scorecards, a lot of good stuff that's provided by the customers. We can go out with surveys, we can collect stuff internally. So
the real deal is performance matters. So what that means is good parts per million, good on-time delivery, good parts on time is the simplified equation. Single-digit PPMs, 100% sustained on-time delivery, that is considered good performance of a quality system.
internal auditing, that was always a documented process, but again, use the turtle. Quality management system, it's monitoring the continuous improvement, sample customer-specific requirements. Management review, analysis of the process performance and the risks. That's a bit added new.
Cost of poor quality is very critical, you know, because a lot of companies that do have very good performance are paying high sorting cost or high cost to catch the errors. So that cost of poor quality is a good efficiency look at your outgoing PPM, and the efficiency of maintaining a good performance is a balance to how efficiently you can run a company and make sure you got good cash flow and a profitable company.
Okay, so we got 2 minutes to go here. That's pretty good timing. And the score is 21-21. We never figured out who was the home team, but
I'm the home team because I live here.
I got it. Okay, you're the home team. Okay, so we got 2 minutes to go. Problem solving is a documented process. And again, a good documented process from the CQI is escapes, occurrence, and systemic. So you're looking at all three of those, not just one.
And more focus on error proofing. If there's one thing I can leave you with, more focus on error proofing. Most companies have repeat type of complaints over and over. Good error proofing will prevent bad parts from escaping.
Systemic root cause is something that management is responsible for. Deming had said early on 80% of your core issues are caused by management. We at Bose added a rudder to the fishbone. So management's really driving the ship. And that was updated in the Deming Institute to 96% of all of your core issues. So think in terms of systemic issues, think in terms of what management can do, how you can engage them in your problem solving. Again, we've got the turtle, a combo document, and then we've got a sub-process for each one of these, continuous improvement and error proofing. So that's how we've packaged what we do at Flex. And Bob had talked about the error proofing. Warranty management, it's not required, but we've added a turtle for it, and we've packaged it pretty well. Continuous improvement is another documented process. We got that. And we just ran out of time. It's still 21-21.
Let's show them the links and the websites.
Okay, well, we're going to overtime here. Okay, so it's still summary. It's about the defect prevention, reduce waste, variation, process approach thinking, air-based thinking. This is a Gantt chart of what we had showed you before. So you start with when do you want to get certified, back it back up through, use your green, red, yellow indicators for how you're doing on your approach. And We've got the new CQIs, and that's in Appendix B, so there's a lot there for companies to learn. And just a summary of takeaways. Again, it's about risk-based thinking. I happen to think in terms of a big concern is auditor competency. It's the old plan, do, check act, study act. Bob, there's a clock running here on certification.
I'm telling you.
Got 2 slides to go.
Yep. The October 1st, all the audits are going to have to be IATF. Well, of course, that might change, but the certifying body, if they're forcing you into something that you can't do, talk to them. Maybe they can get a waiver. We're getting some, we're just getting a multitude of questions from the simulcast, Rod. Okay. They like Rod's practice of having the process owner explain their findings in the closing meeting. That's always an interesting concept. Any questions out there before we break it off? Captain Joe's just waiting. Did I throw you a football there, Joe? Look at that.
Hey.
Yes. Rod and I just scored tie in the overtime. Any other questions? Bell's Brewery, there's a question right there.
Yeah, now you said we get a copy of your presentation.
Sure.
I guess to get a copy, or do I just email you there?
Yeah, just email us here. You know, we got a couple, good links to have. Training in alphabetic order, AIAG, ASQ, Omnex, Quality Support Group, Quality Training Portal. This is really good training. If anybody, just tell Ray that Rod sent you, and he'll set you up. Tell Angelo or Roland that Rod sent you. They'll set you up.
Captain Joe's got a question over here, all the way from Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Rework, we have third-party rework. It said that it was going to be expanded or some more emphasis. What is it?
Yeah, there's a requirement that says unless otherwise specified by customer, which is kind of tricky words, you've got to ask your customer first about rework, okay? And there's repair is the same deal. Now, those are 2 separate animals, but depending on who you're doing work for, and probably the U.S. government, if you're doing certain types of rework, I think the intent is you let them know what kind of rework you're doing, and you're getting their permission. Not every time you have rework, but for certain types, this is what we're going to do. And the other thing is you're supposed to be adding rework into your FEMA and control plan. So there's another trick. More stuff. So they're supposedly going to come up with a sanctioned interpretation, or FAQ. We've put questions into IAOB and IATF about that, and they claim that they will get an FAQ to help clarify that one. Does that answer your question, Joe? You guys have a safe trip. Everybody have a safe trip back to wherever you're going. Safety first. Check that IATF website and the U.S. Department of Transportation website for your own car if you have a vehicle that has a recall.
Thank you all.